want to talk right now about the Trump administration's recent attack on a boat that had departed from Venezuela and was in the Caribbean Sea. The Trump administration bombed the boat, killing 11 people aboard. Now, the Trump administration has said that they knew that the people on this boat were drug smugglers, that they were narco-terrorists, that they were headed for the United States. Although they've offered a little bit of contradictory information, Marco Rubio initially said that they were headed for Trinidad, but later changed his story, saying that this drug-laden boat was bound for the United States. The Trump administration has not given a detailed legal rationale for blowing up this boat allegedly containing drugs, nor have they provided any actual evidence that there were drugs or drug traffickers aboard this boat. And this raises, to say the least, some pretty deep problems. One of the problems is that this was blatantly illegal. This is an act of mass murder, right? There's no allegation that this was actual self-defense, that these people, the Trump administration is not even saying that these people opened fire. They are saying that these people were trying to basically import a contraband product into the United States, and that the Trump administration, rather than intercepting this boat, just killed everyone, just murdered everyone. And they aren't really claiming that anything otherwise. They're really sort of bragging about the fact that these people were trying to bring in something illegal into the United States, basically violating trade laws, really, and that in response they were all killed. Officials have said that there's no plan to go further in explaining, providing evidence, providing legal justification for this strike. Although the New York Times quotes a former federal law enforcement official, a little vague who that person is, and it's part of the New York Times standard practice of saying, an anonymous official says, but they did quote a former senior federal law enforcement official who spoke, of course, on the condition of anonymity, saying this was a significant change in U.S. anti-narcotics operations. Long-standing policies would be to intercept this kind of boat. That after identifying a ship hauling drugs, the Coast Guard would attempt to get the crew to stop and give up. If the ship tries to flee, a sharpshooter can get the order to take out the engines. Everything is done to preserve life, one official said. We don't just like to shoot up boats. That's what the Coast Guard said about how they do this. And they said we rarely have to shoot in self-defense, although we do, because most narcos just give up. The Coast Guard then searches the boats for drugs. And they say you don't know if there are drugs on board until after you board, until you search the ship. The former federal law enforcement official that the New York Times talked to also said that it was a little odd to have 11 people manning a boat that could have been crewed by 2 or 3, because traffickers are always trying to minimize the amount of people so they can maximize the amount of cargo, the amount of drugs. And that if there were 11 people on a small boat, it was more likely that the vessel was carrying migrants. And it would be impossible to know for sure, however, given that any evidence of drug smuggling was destroyed in the attack. We have here both the facts that the Trump administration violated standard protocol, that it was totally unnecessary to kill all these people because the Coast Guard has established methods for intercepting these boats, searching them for drugs. We also see that these might have been totally innocent migrants. These might have been totally unarmed people coming to the U.S. to look for work. They might not even have been coming to the U.S., as Marco Rubio indicated. So he might have just murdered 11 innocent people. The Trump administration, of course, doesn't care whether they murdered innocent people because they think of all migrants as a threat and as animals and terrorists and blah, blah. And when I posted on Twitter/X earlier today about this and said they might have just killed a bunch of innocent migrants, of course, all the MAGA people who are really, truly soulless and lacking in humanity replied and basically said some variation on, good, I hope they get a few more. This is what I voted for. Fuck yeah. Get them, go get them, Trump. So that really shows you the mindset that is underlying what I think is basically a fascist administration that really does not believe in any constraints on executive power, that believes the president should be a dictator who can just point at whoever he wants and have them killed. And that's what happened here. The president decided that it didn't matter that there was no congressional authorization for him to kill all these people. It didn't really matter if they were innocent. It didn't really matter what the evidence was. We, the public, don't even need to know the evidence because it's up to the president to determine who gets killed and who doesn't. It didn't matter that this wasn't even in the United States, that this was just in the Caribbean. It didn't even matter whether the people were definitely going to the United States. The president of the United States has the authority to murder whoever he wants, wherever he wants in the world, without evidence. They can be totally innocent. All he has to do is say they're a threat to national security, they're terrorists, and by saying the magic words, national security and terrorism, he can just commit acts of really brazen, premeditated first-degree murder. I think that's pretty disturbing. One of the even more disturbing things, however, is the reaction to this. So Politico reported that Democrats, who you would hope, after a strike like this, would come out in unanimity and say, this is outrageous. The president is not a dictator. The president isn't allowed to murder whoever he wants without any evidence that they've committed a crime. Even if they have committed a crime, you're supposed to arrest them. You're supposed to take them to court. You're supposed to prosecute them. You're not supposed to just blow people up. That's called an extrajudicial execution, and that's what dictatorships do. So you would expect that the opposition party, who supposedly hate Trump, who are supposedly the resistance, that they would come out in full-throated opposition to this. But Politico reports that Democrats in Congress, who were quick to condemn Trump's strikes against Iranian nuclear sites. Well, that's not even really true. Some of them loved the strikes against Iranian nuclear sites. But Politico says they've struggled to find a unified message that won't make them look soft on drug cartels. So they think standing up for the rule of law, standing up against the principle that the president could just commit murder whenever he wants at will, they think that will make them look soft on crime, so they won't do it. We've actually recently published an article by Alex Vitale, author of The End of Policing, about how Democrats, because they are terrified of looking soft on crime, have failed to resist Trump's, or have embraced in some cases, Trump's attempts to take over cities and basically have the National Guard become their law enforcement apparatus. Politico says that Senator Tim Kaine, who has pushed to ensure Congress authorizes military actions, told reporters he's still digging into the legality of the strike and didn't elaborate on his concerns. Well done, Tim Kaine. Very inspiring there. Really, really strong statement. And they said that Representatives Ro Khanna and Senator Bernie Sanders, who are usually quick to note overuse of presidential power, did not respond to requests for comment. Great. Thanks, guys. You're really doing a wonderful job of showing a unified opposition to the president claiming the power to murder anyone, anywhere, wherever he likes, for whatever reason he likes, without providing any evidence that they've done a single thing wrong. I find that very, very dispiriting. I think they should be, frankly, I think that they should be pushing for the impeachment of a president who does that. One of the serious problems here, though, you might have noticed that I said the president was claiming the authority to kill whoever he wanted for any reason. And you might have noticed something a little familiar there, which is that that's precisely what Barack Obama did too. Obama claimed precisely that authority. In fact, he even claimed the authority to kill with drone strikes U.S. citizens far from any battlefield if the president had decided with his quote-unquote disposition matrix, that was the term they used for the thing that helped them decide who to kill. Barack Obama did claim the absolute unreviewable power to determine who lived and who died, and he used it. There were, in fact, 10 times more airstrikes in the covert war on terror during Barack Obama's presidency than under his predecessor, George W. Bush. Obama embraced the U.S. drone program, overseeing more strikes in his first year than Bush carried out during his entire presidency. Hundreds and hundreds of strikes with hundreds of civilians killed and very little transparency. So one of the reasons that Democrats have a hard time responding to and attacking this is because they're guilty themselves. They're complicit in the radical expansion of executive power that has brought us to this point where a megalomaniac is totally abusing his power in ways that if any other state did them, we would deem them a rogue state, a terrorist state, a lawless state. And this is something that is discussed by Noam Chomsky and myself in The Myth of American Idealism. We discuss how both Democratic and Republican presidents have shown scant regard for both domestic constraints on presidential power. They just sort of subvert those, ignore those, and challenge the courts to do something to stop them. And especially for international law, which they treat as basically equivalent to toilet paper. I mean, they don't even really care what the laws of war say, or what the United Nations says, or what the Geneva Conventions say. Worryingly, Trump has said that this is the beginning. Please let this serve as notice to anybody even thinking about bringing drugs into the United States of America. Again, that's a non-violent act in and of itself, bringing drugs into the United States. And people in the United States, I think, have always been horrified that a country like Singapore uses capital punishment for drug smuggling, because that seems such an extreme response to a non-violent crime. Well, actually, we are making Singapore look a model of humanity and decency, because they at least give you a trial before they kill you. Here, Trump is just saying, we don't even have to give you a trial. We don't have to prove it. Maybe you're not even a drug smuggler. Maybe you're just Venezuelan. And in that case, you're basically less than human. You're basically an insect. We can just destroy you if we decide that you're not fit to live. And he said this is the beginning. Pete Hegseth has said this is the beginning. More of this is going to happen. And it's alarming from the initial reaction that Democrats, partially because they are responsible for giving Trump these powers in the first place, because they gave Barack Obama similar powers and didn't do anything to stop him, and partially because they are babies who are just terrified of being called soft on crime just by sticking up for the principle that murder is wrong, which, as we know from the case of Gaza, they are totally incapable of following that principle through to its conclusion, which is that we should oppose genocide in every and all cases. You would think it would also lead them to the conclusion that we should oppose the president conducting a mass extrajudicial killing on the high seas, but apparently not. But I wanted to draw your attention to this case because I think that it is something that's not going to get enough attention. The criminality and the madness of it, the true homicidal insanity of it. I don't think our resistance heroes are going to stand up against it. That we should be trying to get our elected officials to, at the very least, issue one of those strongly worded letters that Chuck Schumer has said is the main tactic of resistance against Donald Trump. You'd think we could get that, at least. I don't know. Apparently not. Anyway, subscribe to Current Affairs Magazine, because we make sense. We're consistently anti-murder. Pick up a copy of The Myth of American Idealism, where you can read about all the various horrendous crimes that U.S. presidents have committed over the past decades. Spoiler, it's a lot. This is a comprehensive summary of Noam Chomsky's foreign policy thinking and analysis over the course of the past 60 years, and it's coming out in paperback next month. It's available from Penguin Random House, but the print edition of Current Affairs is also spectacular. It comes out 6 times a year. Go to currentaffairs.org/subscribe today.